Wednesday, April 4th, and it's time for public comment. Is there anybody who wishes to have public comment? I believe the answer is no. May I have approval of the minutes of the prior?
Move approval.
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and now that was the consent calendar. No, we're up to the consent calendar. And the item on the consent calendar is the approval of the resolution 1815D for the North Shore Bay Trail Gap Closure Project. Anybody move
Second.
up? Okay. All those in
Madam
favor?
Chair,
Yes, sir.
just so you know, you have a letter of support on your dais for this.
Thank you. Is that the same one that came as an email? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, it turns out we're going to support it. So I think, waiting for the official vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Well, aye. Anybody opposed? No, of course, because everybody voted. All right. We're next. And the next item is the circulation of the draft fiscal year congestion management. Is there?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll make the staff report. Martin Engelman, CCTA Deputy Executive Director for Planning. And each year we put together a budget for the Congestion Management Agency. Contra Costa Transportation Agency is the designated congestion management agency for the county, and we received that designation in early 1990s when a majority of the cities and the counties asked that we look after all the transportation issues on behalf of the county jurisdictions. So as the Congestion Management Agency, or CMA, the authority executes the planning functions comprised mainly of the Measure J Growth Management Program, and then there's a state equivalent to that, the Congestion Management Program, and we have a third program called Sustainable Community Implementation, or Sustainable Community Strategies Implementation, SCS. To support the Measure J-related functions of the Growth Management Program, the budget uses a portion of the 3% of Measure J allocated out of the half-cent sales tax towards congestion management, transportation planning, facilities, and services. And then there's the state portion, and for that, the state or CMP portion is funded through MTC, and we actually receive federal money for that, Federal Surface Transportation Plan, SDP funds, and also another source of funds for programming and project management, project monitoring. We develop the budget each year by laying out a complete scope of work for the coming year, and we have a complete program description for you on pages 2-9 of your packet. Begins, it's attachment B, and it continues through page 219. And if you want to see all the things we do, they're all there. And then there are kind of on and off years. Sometimes we have heavy involvement in some of those tasks, and sometimes we have lighter involvement. So under the Growth Management Program, you'll see that we maintain a set of travel demand forecasting models and other planning tools, such as geographic information systems, and we develop project databases. We implement and maintain the action plans for routes of regional significance, and from that we build the countywide transportation plan, which we just adopted last September. And we're responsible for implementing and monitoring the growth management program, monitoring compliance with that program, and then from time to time we assess and refine the growth management program and all the regional programs associated with that. For the congestion management program, we're responsible again for computer models, and those models have to be consistent with MTCs. We prepare a draft and final congestion management program every 2 years. We develop strategies for mitigating congestion. We develop the bike plan under the CMP, and occasionally we do corridor system management plans in partnership with Caltrans. The congestion management program also looks after setting priorities for state and federal funding, and the authority takes action on that from time to time, forwarding our recommendations to MTC and to the California Transportation Commission. There are a number of programs that have been delegated down to us from MTC. You've heard of the One Bay Area Grant Program, which we recently allocated funds for, Safe Routes to School, Lifeline Transportation, and community-based transportation plans. So some of these are actually later on the agenda. You'll hear more about them. And then there's also this thing called the Bay Area Partnership and the CMA Association, and we attend those meetings, and that helps us develop our legislative programs in partnership with the other congestion management agencies in the Bay region, and it strengthens our ability to meet the authority's policy goals. The third program has to do with this new component of the Regional Transportation Plan called the Sustainable Communities Strategy. And we work with MTC and we work with our local jurisdictions to develop this strategy, which we've published and updated over the past 4 years. And this strategy is basically to support transit-oriented development through the designation of so-called priority development areas. So all told, I'll give you an overview of the budget. We require about 7 full-time employees to do the whole effort, and that includes the folks you see here, plus some of projects' time, Tim Hale's time, and other projects people's times for the monitoring. The growth management program is $1 million, or 31% of the budget. The CMP is close to $2 million, nearly 60% of the budget. And then the SCS is $340,000. So all of these costs are offset to an extent by the federal funds and the state funds, PPM funds, and then also some of these costs are just pass-through funds where we get the money from the state through MTC and pass it on to other agencies. But there is a cost to the local jurisdictions of operating the congestion management program, and the relationship there was established through a JPA that we entered into in 1993 with all of the local jurisdictions, and it lists out the responsibilities that our agency must carry out as the operating CMA, and then it requires that in April of each year we develop this budget and we share it with the local agencies. And the main reason we're sharing it with local agencies, especially with the city managers, which we'll do a week from tomorrow, is that there is a local contribution involved, and each year we develop that local contribution and run it by the cities to make sure they're okay with it. So the reason there's a local contribution is that we can't just use the federal money. There's a matching requirement, so we have to match 11.47%. And so in the JPA, the JPAs have agreed to pay at a minimum that match, and then also to pay for other CMA activities that are not fully funded through the federal effort. So the contribution last year was close to $400,000, and this year it's a little bit lower. It's about 5% lower, $380,000. And we will take that to the public managers for their review on April 12th. And assuming they approve it, then we can move on, bring this budget to you in June for final adoption. And historically, we set that number, and it may be $300,000, $400,000, but we actually bill for actual costs. So, for example, the billing this year, we estimated it at $400,000. And it's closer to $200,000 in terms of funds we actually spent on this, because sometimes the work takes a little longer than anticipated. So that's my report to you on the CMA budget. And I do need to mention that we may have a minor tweak or two. It won't affect the bottom line. It's basically pass-through money if we run into some changes. But this will go to the CMAs with your approval, and then we'll bring it back to you in June with any further revisions.
Thank you. Any discussion or questions? Okay, can I have a recommendation then, please?
I'd move the item. Thank you.
Okay, so all those in favor? Aye. Okay, passes. On to the next item.
Good evening, Chair Haskew and committee members. Peter Engel, Director of Programs here at the Authority. This item is a proposed distribution of state transit assistance funds from the population-based formula to the Contra Costa Public Transit Service providers for only fiscal year 2018-19. The staff report has a lot of detail about this item, including history of straight transit assistance population-based funding and how it flows through MTC. So I just want to highlight a few items of importance for you as I give my report. In February, MTC granted the programming authority for the STA population-based funds to the CMAs. So the authority is taking on that responsibility now. The original proposal from MTC was going to have a significant burden on the authority staff time for reporting and such, but we've been able to negotiate that down to a very minimal amount of reporting that should be simple for us to do. And we can, at some point, with the board's direction, even do a multi-year policy, so we won't have to come back to you every year for this. What we're proposing this year is just a one-year distribution, and there's primarily two reasons for that. One is the STA funds have significantly increased through SB1. We don't know the future of SB1 until probably November, so we felt like any significant changes to the policy were unnecessary until we really know what's going on with SB1. The other issue is we received this new resolution from MTC in February, and they want to know in May, so we didn't feel like there was significant time to vet any real policy, significant policy changes through the RTPCs and through the transit operators. So for that reason, we're proposing just to do a one-year distribution. What we're proposing to do is just use the same percentages and formulas that were used by MTC in the past. So this would include funds that went to small operators, some funding for paratransit operations, and some funding to support lifeline transportation programs. We talked about this approach with all the transit operators and with MTC, and everybody was perfectly fine with it. They said it sounded like a very prudent way to go about it for this first year. Once we know the fate of SB1, we will sit down with a group, and we'll come and talk to you about what kind of group to put together, maybe a longer-term policy for distributing these funds. So I just wanted to leave it brief at that. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Peter, thank you. And obviously, I think I read in there that the groups that are the beneficiaries that we're comfortable with that distribution. Leave it that way. Is there anything implied that we have to oversight what they do with those funds, given that we help do the division of this, or is that all just based on the original documentation, and we don't have to do a review of how they're using the money?
Yeah, so we'll do a report to MTC annually, and our first report will be May of 2019. And we just have to document from the transit operators that they're using the funds appropriately, like within communities of concern, which isn't a requirement, but it's an important thing that MTC wants to know. Right. So that's really mainly the only main requirement that MTC is asking for.
So it's really their criteria, each of those individual beneficiaries, to come up with theirs, respond, and make sure that it complies when reported. Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Move approval.
Thank you. Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next item.
Madam Chair, Martin Engelman again, and item 4 is authorization to release a request for qualifications for preparation of community-based transportation plans in Contra Costa. We went through a round of this back in the mid-90s, and basically it's a plan developed by an individual city for a community of concern where there's a high percentage of minorities and low-income households that don't have access to transportation. And the last time we did it, we developed a long list of projects, and Peter Engel put together this list for you on page 411. I think you saw this last month or the month before as well. all of the things that come out of these plants in terms of services that can be funded through MTC's Lifeline Transportation Program. And to get those funds, the project has to be developed through this very grassroots kind of a effort to do transportation planning at the local level. So not a whole lot of money here, $215,000, and it's federal money, so it's hard to spend, hard to use. But what we proposed to you last time, and we laid out for you was, and you agreed to this, was that the authority would act as the program manager. We would do kind of a master RFQ. We would ask consultant teams to submit their qualifications. The selection committee will consist of the planning managers from the local jurisdictions that have community-based transportation plans. So it's Richmond, Concord, Martinez, and the county would sit on the selection committee. We would pick 3 or 4 qualified teams, and then we need to decide which of these plans we're going to do and work with the cities on how we allocate the funds. We may be able to get more than 215 if we hunt around for additional funding. We did this very successfully. Brad worked on this for the PDA planning grants. That was $2.7 million, a little bit more money. But we got a group of consultants, and we worked the contracts with the local jurisdictions. The beauty of this is we only go through the federal process once. All of the invoicing goes through the authority, and we're very familiar with invoicing MTC for this. But the local jurisdiction has the control over the consultant, and they manage the consultant. So we would release this RFQ after the authority meets in April, and it'll take a while to get the selection process together. Probably the work on this won't really begin until September, October, and that's actually when the money becomes available. So we're asking for your approval to release RFQ 18-3 for preparation of community-based transportation plans in Contra Costa.
Questions?
I'd make a motion. I think this is a good idea, and appropriate use of the money, so I'd move the item.
Okay, second, thank you. Moved and seconded, all those in favor say aye. Aye. And that takes us to other business. Is there any business from the committee? Anybody else have any business they'd like to share? Okay.
So I'm sorry, Commissioners, but I forgot to bring our we won the Catalyst Award. CCTA Momentum Station won the Catalyst Award from the East Bay EDA. And so I have a nice, it's a trophy that we received, so I'll bring it to the board meeting, but it was a pretty big deal. So now we're going to go get honored at the Conference of Mayors and potentially go again on TV to talk about what we do. So I think that's great news.
Yes, congratulations. Anything else? I like good news. I always like good news. Yeah, by a whole lot. All right, I think that finishes it. So we're going to adjourn to the next regular meeting on Wednesday, May 2nd, 2018, same time, same place. Thank you. Good night.